Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here, your source for gaming, tech, emulation, and open source news. Let's get started. Alright, to kick things off, we're talking about PlayStation 4 emulation with ShadPS4, and ShadPS4 just got a brand new update. So at the time of filming, ShadPS4 version 0.10.0, codenamed the last LNDF, is the latest update. And I would say this is a pretty big one. So here's the start of their update, and I find this very interesting. They say, surprise, bet you didn't expect a release from me, did you? Well, you all asked for a miracle, and here I am providing one. Anyways, this release is dedicated to one of our not-so-new dev, LNDF, who is responsible for a significant amount of the new GPU code, such as implementing direct memory access for video memory. This isn't a solo endeavor though, there were far more updates to the emulator from the rest of the team as well, improving compatibility across well-known titles, such as PT, Drive Club, Infamous, Bloodborne, The Last Guardian, Shadow of the Colossus, although this one still can't boot without hacks, and more. They then go on to say, the big new feature this release brings with it is readbacks, which emulates shared memory on the PS4 by reading back memory that was modified on the GPU back to the CPU side, enabling a lot more games to function properly, fixing vertex explosions in Bloodborne and similar games, almost fully fixing climbing in The Last Guardian, and much more. It isn't enabled by default though, you'll have to turn it on manually in the config file yourself, as this is still a very experimental feature, and will break some games, plus it comes with a not insignificant hit to performance as well. So on top of all of that, there's even more stuff in here. There's controller remapping improvements, rewriting the controller menu and adding minor fixes to the keyboard and mouse, and even more. There has been a whole lot done to this. If you are interested in ShadPS4 and wanted to learn more about it, like everything we talk about, links are in the description below right at the bottom. I don't hide my sources. And speaking about updates and stuff on GitHub, next up we're talking about Mesen. For those who may be unaware, Mesen stands for Subscribe to Mr. Sujano, and it's a multi-system emulator for the NES, SNES, Game Boy Advance, PC Engine, SMS, Game Gear, and WonderSwan for Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. So at the time of filming, Mesen version 2.1.1 is the latest update. And with this update, they say this release mostly contains bug fixes and accuracy improvements, and I'm guessing they say mostly here because there are some new features. For example, for the PC Engine, they've added support for CD plus G disc playback. And for the SNES, they added support for Homebrew SNES Rumble controller. This one is 100% free open source and available on GitHub. And speaking about exciting stuff, next up here we're talking about Paprium. And if you're a fan of the Sega Genesis, if you're a fan of beat 'em ups, or if you're a fan of receiving something after you've paid for it, and receiving being the quotations here. Anyways, here it's being reported that Paprium has been dumped and is playable on emulators. So for those who may be unaware, Paprium is a side-scrolling beat-em-up game for the Mega Drive developed by Studio Watermelon and released in 2020. It was a part of a crowdfunding campaign and is a very expensive game if you can get your hands on it. If you are interested in learning more about Paprium and some of the surrounding controversies that were reported, I'll drop a few links to a few articles in the description below and feel free to check them out. For example, this one here that's titled Paprium's Disastrous Launch Party Leaves Backers Furious as Unfinished Prototype is shown off. And this one here, Troubled Genesis Brawler Paprium is apparently back on track. And this one here, the artist behind troubled Sega Mega Drive fighter Paprium speaks out. I have been upset for some time. I'll drop a link to the Wikipedia article about this game, as well as there's some very interesting information about the hardware, as well as some more information about the controversies. And I guess here that there are some people who backed the project who still haven't received their copy of the game. However, it does appear that now the game has been dumped, and I'm going to assume this may put a dent in the value of secondhand cartridges, as the rarity is probably going to plummet. Anyways, taking a look here, the game actually doesn't look too bad. Let me know your thoughts about Paprium in the comments below. And speaking about games, next up we're talking about Street Fighter 3. And if you're a fan of Street Fighter 3 on the PlayStation 2, you might be a fan of this news. So right here on GitHub, it says Street Fighter 3 Decomp, decompilation of Street Fighter 3 for the PS2. From my understanding, this is still currently a work in progress, and they've been working on it, I think, for about 9 months, give or take. And I guess they've hit some major milestones, like getting the Capcom, or at least close to getting the Capcom logo to boot at the start of the game. And I guess here the CRI middleware functions are 90.84% complete or decompiled. And the game functions are about 37.44% decompiled, and that is pretty good in terms of overall progress. Now, it's worth mentioning that decompilation does not mean automatically PC port, but I am very curious to see what happens with this project and where it goes from here. And speaking about stuff on GitHub, next up we're talking about Nintendo 64 emulation with Gopher 64, and Gopher 64 just got a brand new update and a brand new feature, or two. So at the time of filming, the latest update for Gopher 64 is version 1.0.19, and in this update we've got some fixes, we've got some new features and improvements. For example, they've added in a button here for NetPlay Discord, they've made expansion pack optional, there's better RAM access checks, and they've also added in here cheat support. And speaking about updates and stuff on GitHub, next up we're talking about one of my favorite, if not my favorite file archiver, and that's 7-Zip. And 7-Zip just got a brand new update to version 25. Now, I don't know about you, but I would say this is a real nice update. They say 7-Zip for Windows can now use more than 64 CPU threads for compression. And they say if there are more than one processor groups in Windows, 7-Zip distributes running CPU threads across different processor groups. bzip2 compression speed was increased by 15 to 40%. Deflate zip-gz compression was increased by 1 to 3%. Improved support for zip, CPIO, and FAT archives. And there's also some bug fixes. And additionally here, if you're a fan of dark mode, there's a fork of 7-Zip that is called DarkZip. And it's a project to bring dark mode to 7-Zip, and I think this one also looks pretty good. Next up, we're talking about the Nintendo Switch 2, and there's a very interesting interview over on WCCF Tech that's gaining a lot of traction, and a lot of news reporters are talking about it. And it's about the Switch 2 and Virtuos. I'd recommend checking out the article. It's a Q&A with Virtuos and WCCF Tech, and like everything we talk about, links are in the description below right at the bottom. And for those who may not be aware, Virtuos has been responsible or had their hand in a lot of different ports. One of the quotes from the Q&A is being talked about quite a bit, and that's this here. They say GPU-wise, the Switch 2 performs slightly below the Xbox Series S. The difference is noticeable in handheld mode. However, the Series S does not support technologies like DLSS, which the Switch 2 does. This makes the GPU capabilities of the two consoles comparable overall. Furthermore, CPU-wise, there is a clear distinction between the two consoles. The Switch 2 is closer to the PS4 in this respect, having a CPU just a bit more powerful than the PS4's. They then go on to say, any game shipping at 60 FPS on the Series S should easily port to the Switch 2. Likewise, a 30 FPS Series S game that's GPU bound should also port well. Games with complex physics, animations, or other CPU intense elements might incur additional challenges in reaching 30 or 60 FPS, or require extra optimizations during porting. So my opinion here, this kind of slots the Nintendo Switch in a very interesting space. I mean, a little less powerful than the Xbox Series S, but more powerful than the PlayStation 4. And it also goes to show the importance of stuff like FSR and DLSS moving forward. I'm assuming in the gaming world, at the very least, DLSS and FSR is going to be heavily leaned on for future consoles. And speaking about the future, next up we're talking about the exact opposite of that, kind of talking about the past. I mean, this is a new game, but for an older system. So there's a brand new Squid game for Game Boy. It's fully playable and 100% free. In my opinion here, Squid game actually translates pretty well to the original Game Boy. It is playable on real hardware. It's playable in your browser if you want it, and it's also playable via emulation. To me, this is a pretty jam-packed game. I mean, there's 6 playable games from Squid Game Season 1. There's a story mode with cutscenes, there's a minigame select mode, and there's also a brutal hard mode with only 1 life, and there are 3 different endings, secrets, and cheat codes. All of this is 100% free, and there is an option to donate to the developers over on itch.io. And all of the important links are in the description of that video, which the link to this video will be in the description of this video. Next up, we're going up a few generations from the Game Boy and talking about Nintendo Switch 2 stuff and Nintendo Switch 2 emulation, or rather Nintendo Switch 2 emulation. So in yesterday's video, I titled it Nintendo Switch 2 emulation, not for clickbait, but to raise awareness about Axiom. I mean, you wouldn't believe the amount of pings and comments and tags and messages I got about Axiom from people asking me if it's real, from a lot of people thinking that it was real and being very excited about it, and some people saying it was fake and I should cover it. And I wanted to raise awareness because this emulator is fake. So first and foremost, yesterday's video was not clickbait. I talked about Nintendo Switch 2 emulation, and I talked about the Nintendo Switch 2 emulation scene. Anyways here, Axiom, it's fake, and they keep posting fake stuff. They keep getting called out for it. But this is being covered more and more, and there are more people convinced that this emulator is real. So in yesterday's video, we took a look at the screenshot that Axiom provided showcasing Mario Kart World Tour in action. And lo and behold, it was the exact same as what Nintendo had showcased for Mario Kart World Tour. Axiom seemed to have just lifted this frame right here from the video and said it was Switch 2 emulation for their emulator. Anyways, Axiom keeps posting more and more stuff, and more people are talking about it, and more people are taking a look into what they're posting here, and more people are exposing them. Unfortunately, there seem to be more and more people believing that Axiom is real. I really don't know what Axiom's end game is here, and some people may say, why am I covering it and giving them exposure? And it's because it's being talked about quite a bit. I'm not the initial source of this exposure. Anyways here, Pirate Nation, who take this stuff with a grain of salt, but I think this tweet is right on the money. They dug deeper, and it seems like a complete scam to gain followers or something worse. And they looked into this and saw even more one-for-one perfect comparisons with what Nintendo posted and what that Switch 2 emulator is claiming. I don't foresee myself talking about Axiom more than this unless Axiom continues to gain popularity and is covered maybe on some other news sites or something like that. But at this point in time, it's 100% fake. I'm surprised that people believe it's real. I know that people are hopeful for Switch 2 emulation, but Axiom is not where it's at. However, and this is a big however, there are rumors out there that someone has a fork of Ryujinx running Nintendo Switch 2 games. And I'm very skeptical about that one, but there is that rumor around there, and that's where Axiom, I think, was gaining some traction. And speaking about stuff that's generating chatter, next up we're talking about Ubisoft. And I guess Ubisoft has a new EULA that's generating quite a bit of negative publicity and also raising awareness because of other companies as well. Anyways, Does It Play says, Ubisoft has completely lost all plots imaginable, forcing players to destroy all copies of a product, legally bought copies. Wording is interesting though, so it is indeed a product, not just a license, and it is in our possession, as in we own it, not just a temporary access. I'm going to quickly read this so you can get a better picture of what we're talking about. The EULA is effective from the earlier of the date you purchased, download, or use the product until terminated according to its terms. You and Ubisoft or its licensors may terminate this EULA at any time for any reason. Termination by Ubisoft will be effective upon A, a notice to you, or B, termination of your Ubisoft account, if any, or C, at the time of Ubisoft's decision to discontinue offering and or supporting the product. This EULA will terminate automatically if you fail to comply with any of the terms and conditions of this EULA. Upon termination for any reason, you must immediately uninstall the product and destroy all copies of the product in your possession. Now, on a quick side note here before we get back to this main thing, I'm curious to see how this affects Stop Killing Games, because by the sounds of it, you own the product and it's not just a license to use the product for an extended period of time until whenever they see fit. This seems like you own the product. And even more interestingly, and going back on topic, it appears that other companies have this clause as well. So I guess it's Ubisoft that started this conversation. Other people did some investigation and found other companies that use similar language. So they're saying here, Sega has a similar clause in their EULA as well that also states you must destroy the product if the agreement is terminated by either yourself or Sega. This clause isn't mutually exclusive to Ubisoft, and they wonder how many companies actually expect you to destroy your copy. Now, I've seen a lot of commentary surrounding that EULA, and well, I guess the different EULAs in general, and a lot of people do not seem to be happy with the language of them. And I'm curious, would you destroy your game if the EULA said to destroy it after the EULA was terminated, a game you paid for? Some people are saying that EULAs wouldn't hold up in a court of law, and I'm guessing that this would be one glaring example of a problematic EULA, which goes right into the next segment of Stop Killing Games. And I'm wondering here if Stop Killing Games will be bolstered, is that the right word for it, by an EULA like that says, yeah, you technically own the games, or kind of says you own the games. At least that's the way I interpret it. So at a high level here, the main point of this segment was to talk about Stop Killing Games and the fact that signatures keep rolling in, and they passed 1.2 million signatures so far for the EU initiative. And for the UK side of things, they've surpassed 172,000 signatures and still looking for more on the entire initiative. If you're interested in Stop Killing Games, I'd recommend reading up and learning about it. And if you haven't signed and we're debating it, don't take the high signature count as a guaranteed win. Take that as in maybe they need even more here for even more awareness. I would highly encourage looking and learning about the initiative and deciding to sign on it, and actually signing on it if you wanted to. Now, I am not a lawyer, and this is not legal advice, but I am very, very curious to see if these EULAs will help out that Stop Killing Games initiative. It may throw a wrench in there for those big companies. Let me know your thoughts. But anyways, that is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and no fluff. Or actually, no, the legendary One Fluff did make a quick appearance. We talked about a bunch today. Feel free to discuss anything we talked about in the comments below. If you like this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button. Check out my other videos. Don't tempt fate. Save your state.